I'll trust my husband that if I get too quiet, will you just put your hand up and it will mean that I am not delivering. Okay. All right, so thanks so much, Mark. Thank you to the Poison Pen for hosting us, and thank you to everyone for being here today. Yes, as Mark mentioned, I'm founder of PEN America's Arizona chapter. So a bit about PEN America. We started in 1922, and we work at the intersection of literature and human rights to protect free expression in the United States and worldwide. We're headquartered in Manhattan. Thank you. So PEN supports journalism and fights book banning, disinformation, and censorship. Noteworthy members have included Maya Angelou, Robert Frost, Langston Hughes, Barbara Kingsolver, Toni Morrison, Salman Rushdie, John Steinbeck, the list goes on and on. So I launched our Arizona chapter a few years ago, and we've had many great events since then. If you would like to sign up to learn more about our events or our different advocacy campaigns, please sign in on that sheet right there. So today's event is in honor of International Press Freedom Day, which was held earlier this month. Ever since PEN started in 1922, the organization has been steadfast in its belief that the Fourth Estate provides a check and balance that is essential to a functional democracy. PEN America supports journalists as they exercise the right to investigate and to report to the public without fear of intimidation or punishment by government authorities. We're the only organization that celebrates writers of all stripes and defends the liberties that make their writing possible. We organize campaigns against the persecution of journalists all over the world, and we work to free them from unjust detention. So here in the United States, if you haven't noticed, the first half of 2025 has seen unprecedented threats to news outlets and reporters. And as such, PEN America has been forthright in its defense of a free press. So hopefully a humorous moment here. Sorry to go partisan here, to go political, but on the car ride over, I wanted to tell my 4-year-old daughter, like, what the heck is she going to be hearing today? Like, what even is this? You know, this would be confusing to a 4-year-old. And so I explained to her what journalists are and what they do. And then I said, Trump is being mean to journalists. And she said, Mama, is Trump being mean to you? And I said no, because thankfully I don't know him. Yeah. You bet you're a bad reporter, stupid reporter. So what has PEN been doing? We recently wrote a national article that demonstrates how defunding public media hits rural areas the hardest. We wrote a national article about the need for journalists to come together to defend the First Amendment. We released a report on the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. When I was practicing reading this speech, I kept saying 1,000 days of Trump presidency, and it's because it seems like it, exactly. So, that report is titled "A 5-Alarm Fire for Free Speech," which discusses the threat to the First Amendment and the media. And during our World Voices Festival, we featured a panel of journalists from across the world who are working under threat. One such panelist is American, staff writer for The Atlantic. Did you ever think we would be in this position? That American reporters would be subjected to the same treatment as reporters who serve under authoritarian regimes? Well, here we are. So PEN will continue to champion the free press. The free press is near and dear to me, to our panelists, and hopefully to all of you as well. But let's face it, a huge percentage of people in this country don't agree with us on this. I'm sick of systematic attacks on journalism from our very government, and I'm sick of people blaming the media for practically every problem we face. Do these people who complain about the media understand that almost all journalists are terribly paid, have awful benefits, high stress, are treated as replaceable and disposable, and have almost no job security? Do these people who complain know that journalism is an actual profession? It's not just an industry. Trained journalists, for the most part, got at least 4 years of college education in journalism and had to do internships, but most people aren't thinking about those factors because they've instead been listening to a decades-long attack campaign that has gotten the American public to distrust journalists. The architects of these smear campaigns were and are extremely clever, and they know that if you can get Americans to distrust basic reality, you can get them to believe propaganda. So all these people who complain about reporters, do they really want a country that doesn't have a free press? Is that actually what they want? So when I hear people complaining about the media and saying that they don't trust the media, I used to let it slide, and now I don't let it slide anymore. I ask why you don't trust the media, and I listen to the response. I had to check in with my husband. Is the volume still good, honey? Okay, thanks, babe. So I listen to the response, and then I ask a question. I say, most of our parents and grandparents trusted the media. For instance, Walter Cronkite was voted the most trusted man in America. Did your parents and grandparents trust the media? And the person always says yes. So I respond with the following, something along the lines of, today's reporters follow the same journalistic principles that were trusted by our parents and our grandparents. Were they being duped? We can trust traditional journalists. So I continue to say, yes, they make mistakes occasionally, but overall, reporting from traditional journalists is proven to be largely accurate again and again. So that's my little spiel. I hope each... Thank you. That's my little spiel I give to people who don't trust the media. But unfortunately for you guys, I have way more spiel here for you. So I hope each of you will feel empowered to stick up for the media too, if you don't already. Now, it's easy to paint this as a partisan issue, but I've seen many liberals falling away from traditional media too, and getting more and more of their information from left-wing sources. It's fine to get information from left-wing sources, and it's fine to get information from right-wing sources, but the bulk of our information should come from the middle. At PEN America, we encourage people to think of their media consumption like a dinner plate. We're supposed to eat a diverse diet, right? Well, the same should be true for our media consumption. It should be diverse. So I encourage people to consume right-wing and left-wing media, just like we need a couple sides on our plate, you know, some peas and mashed potatoes. But our main course should be mainstream. I encourage you to share this analogy if you find it helpful. Again, the time to stick up for traditional journalism is now. An easy step you can take is to call or email Republican senators and tell them to support funding public broadcasting in the coming budget. Writing an email is good, but a phone call is even better. So this task would only take 5 or 10 minutes, and if every person in this room did it this week, it would have an impact. I'm excited for our panelists today to share their experiences, not just as journalists, but as authors. I'm a journalist/author too, and I can tell you that it's a wild ride, and by wild, I mean mostly really crappy. But that's just my experience. We'll see what our panelists think. I worked as a newspaper reporter for dailies in California, and I reported for the Associated Press, and I have freelanced extensively. And about 10 years ago, I wrote my first book, which I'll tell you more about in a minute because it's kind of a weird story. And then immediately after that, I wrote a dummies health book, and this week I got a deal for another dummies book. Thank you. I like the kind you get better, but thank you. For fiction. I just haven't been able to. Thank you. Thank you. So no offense to dummies. I'm glad for the deal. Believe me, but I've been trying for a long time to be a fiction author, and I just haven't made it through. So back to that first book, it was a health book. I ghost wrote it for a big national publisher. My contract was for 3 lump sums and no royalties. So as soon as I finished the book, I got a dummies deal, threw myself into that new project, had a great experience with it, and didn't look back. So I saw the book I ghost wrote later on 2 national shows, and it was a weird feeling since my name wasn't on it. So that's part of why I didn't look back either. When you don't get royalties and your name's not on the book, it doesn't give you much incentive to check in on the book or check in on sales. So then fast forward a decade later, and I look up that old ghost-written book, and I see it's now printed with New York Times bestseller on the cover. So it was a New York Times bestseller, and I kid you not that all these years I had no idea. And my agent didn't know either because, like me, he moved on to future deals and didn't look back. I still didn't believe it, even with it printed on the cover. So being a journalist, I checked several credible sources, and it's true that the book was a New York Times bestseller. Thank you. Thank you. So, in that decade of ignorance, I've been working on 2 novels, and I've been surprised to learn that fiction, for me anyway, is actually a lot harder than nonfiction. Publishing is a terribly difficult business. To go from journalism to publishing is to get out of the frying pan and into the fryer. Both industries are, for most authors, full of rejection, instability, uncertainty, low pay, and long hours. Like, woo, what a blast, huh? So big kudos to each of our panelists for putting up with all of that before finding your success. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Tim Igoe, president of the Arizona chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. Tim does so much work to support journalism and is overall a fantastic guy. He's a journalist, an attorney, and a communications director. He's been named a Guggenheim Foundation Pew Reporting Fellow numerous times, and he recently won the Arizona Law College Association Award for his service to the legal profession via journalism. Everyone, please welcome Tim Igoe.
Thank you, Michelle. Michelle, there are a couple ICE agents in the back who want to talk to you. I'm sure your paperwork is in order. It's fine. It's fine. It's all right. No, we have their masks, absolutely. So, whoa. Can I get a woo-hoo for Mark and Michelle? Woo! What's up, book lovers? And Michelle, as somebody who has benefited from numerous dummies books, I thank you. I am your audience. So if you ever need help, focus group, I can tell you how to make the words shorter, even better. But seriously, Michelle, deep thanks, and thank you all for coming to this unique event. Get ready to tap into the inner writer hovering within all of us, and I guarantee you it is there. I have to talk to my agent because I was asked if I could be seated under the young adult sign, but apparently that ship has passed, so you others have that. Not going to happen. And also, this table's okay, but I feel bad. Michelle and Penn had a real-life podium, and it was here in storage. It went missing. I don't. It's a true poison pen mystery. We were going to get another one, but with tariff pricing, reporters could not afford another podium. I guarantee you that's the last tariff joke of the day, I think. So I will tell you one thing that these terrific panelists already know. Published authors have to suffer an indignity all the time, which is every single person, when they discover that they're a published author, they want to tell them about the book that they've written or attempted to write. So I am going to subject them to the same thing, because why not? So I write quite a bit in my day job, but like all English majors, at one point or another, I said I should write a novel, right? So I tried my hand at it, and without consulting my boss, because I work in the legal profession, I decided that if the subject matter was legal, I should be able to write it at work, right? And so I did. The result was a rollicking ride about state Supreme Court justices who decided to retire from the bench so they could make bank finally in their lives. And they opened a law firm in which their shtick was all the partners are former Supreme Court justices. Brilliant, right? What could go wrong? Well, of course, it turns out they disliked each other intensely and disliked hard work even more. Plus, there was ended up being a three-legged dog that did its business throughout the office. There was a boat crash on Tempe Town Lake for some reason. Anyway, the Supremes was as niche-y as you can imagine. Kind of like Suits or the Lincoln Lawyer, but with unattractive people. But let me tell you, going through that process sure cemented in me a love and appreciation of published authors. And as somebody who makes his living as an editor, that is a very valuable lesson to learn. So Mark's already told you something about SBJ, so you can probably guess what a privilege it is for our chapter to co-host this event with PEN America. I'm a longtime member of SBJ and other journalism organizations, but when I met Michelle a few years ago, I was immediately down with collabing with whatever she wanted to do. And I was down with the mission of PEN, because I could see how it aligned with SBJ's mission. I hope you agree, as Michelle suggested, that a free press sits at the cornerstone of our nation and our liberty. Our country's principles require the American people to be well informed in order to make decisions regarding their lives and their local and national communities. Now, despite what some may say, I believe journalists help provide the information necessary for that. And guess what Penn does? They do exactly the same thing by standing shoulder to shoulder with authors speaking their truth. How impressive is that? I even joined Penn as a member, and you can do the same. So, our speakers today are frontline participants in keeping all of us informed and occasionally entertained. Sure, we love to binge watch Severance and The Pit, but we'd like to turn America onto this wild OG notion called the book, right? Right? Come on, you're all in this. They're all in this with me. Hear me out. That thing called the book is ready to stream wherever you are, so carry one with you all the time. Now, there are many famous journalist authors throughout history, and our panelists exemplify a marvelous range of subject, approach, and audience. After all, there are as many topics as there are reporter beats. But unifying all our authors was this: a drive to delve deep into something they cared about and to create a new way of seeing things. So we have 4 truth tellers with us today, and I'm very excited to hear from them. Process-wise, let me tell you how this is going to go. First of all, we're all being recorded. Yeah, I know. We assume that all the time anyway. But I mean for real this time. We are on the Poison Pen Facebook page, I believe, a YouTube channel. So when it comes to Q&A time, please pause. We're going to give you a mic, or I'm going to repeat the question. Try to keep the swearing to a minimum. You know, we don't want the FCC coming after us. We're going to make sure we have time for audience questions. And I'm hoping that the panelists have questions for each other, because as authors, I think they often want to know what the other one is doing with their process. I'm going to introduce each author, ask them to describe a work, and or simply read us an excerpt. The time is theirs. That's supposed to be 4 minutes each. But editor clocks and writer clocks are known to run at different speeds, so we'll see how that works. After that, we'll dive into some deeper questions, then some audience questions, and at the end, we will have selfies. I hope we have selfies. But you also might want to sustain their work by, I don't know, buying a book. So let me introduce the panelists, and you can give a little applause. Leo Banks, I'll start with Leo. Well, applause first of all, is a former, raise your hand please, everybody knows, excellent. A former Arizona Daily Star reporter. His articles have appeared in USA Today, Newsday, the Miami Herald, National Review, National Geographic Traveler, Sports Illustrated, Wall Street Journal, and many others. He served as a correspondent for the LA Times and the Boston Globe. Leo has written 4 books of Old West history for Arizona Highways Publishing, and he's written 4 novels: Double Wide, Champagne Cowboys, 44 Caliber Perfume, and his latest, The Flying Z. Let's give him some applause. Pam Hait. Pam, raise your hand. Hait. So there you go. All right, mistakes were made. I'm sorry. Pam Hait is a reporter for national, regional, and local Arizona publications and is the author of more than a dozen nonfiction books. Some of Pam's titles include The Sonoran Desert Discovery Guide, Discover Arizona Canyons, and The Arizona Bank, Arizona's Story, 1900 to 1987. Give Pam some love. Next, Christina Estes is an Emmy Award-winning reporter who spent more than 20 years working for Phoenix TV and radio stations, most recently for KJZZ, the local NPR station. She now works as a communications director and as a substitute host on Horizon on Arizona PBS, so keep your eyes peeled. Christina is the author of Off the Air and the brand new novel, The Story That Wouldn't Die. I should add, as a KJZZ veteran, Christina also may be able to help you donate your extra car or truck to turn your old ride into support for the content you've gotten used to. So did I do that okay? Was that all right? No, excellent. And then finally, John Washington. John is a staff writer at Arizona Illuminatia, a community-focused media outlet where he writes about the border, climate change, democracy, and more. John's latest book, The Case for Open Borders, was published by Haymarket Books in 2024. In 2020, Verso Books published John's book titled The Dispossessed, A Story of Asylum at the U.S.-Mexico Border and Beyond. John is also a translator, having co-translated most recently The Hollywood Kid and Blood Bodios, which won a PEN Translates Award. Love for John. So at long last, we're going to let our actual authors speak to you a little bit. They are going to begin, as I said, with speaking to you either an elevator speech about the book and read an excerpt, or they're just going to jump into the excerpt. And you're welcome to come up here if you like, or sit there, your choice. Let's start, Pam, if you could begin. Yeah.
Okay. You want to do it here or there?
Yeah, might as well. If I can get back on the chair. Okay, I'll come here. Okay, so it's really nice to be here. So I have one thing that I think is probably unusual from everybody, which was I grew up working in a bookshop that my parents owned. So from the time I was 8 years old, I was selling books. And so one of the questions that he was going to ask us, I know, was anyone surprised you became a writer? The answer was no. Everybody expected me to be a writer. So, and I came, just really quickly, I came to Arizona after working for the Plain Dealer, where I was an investigative reporter, came to Arizona, looked around. At that time, I thought the Arizona Republic was too conservative. This was a while ago. So I started writing for Phoenix Magazine. I was a columnist and covered everything from clean air to dirty politics. And then I started writing for Arizona Highways, and from there started writing nationally. So I've written a lot of nonfiction books. I didn't think any of those would be really interesting to you. But this is a passionate project of mine, having to do with the environment, that I thought I'd just read you a little of. So where I live, we're still trying to save Camelback Mountain, because many of you may think it's saved, because Barry Goldwater supposedly saved it. It's been saved numerous times. What hasn't been saved are lots of land that's there that was never taken into the trust, because at that time, there was no way you could possibly build on these lots because they're much too steep. I mean, there's one, seriously, that's got a boulder the size of a summer house that this guy wants to build a house on. So some neighbors got together and said, we need to save Camelback Mountain. And I had made up a story for my grandchildren who live in, the ones in Connecticut, and had told them the story. And a friend of mine said, you need to tell your neighbors the story. So I told them the story. And she said, well, if you turn that into a book, maybe you donate some of the proceeds. So I said, well, I live here. I love Camelback Mountain. If I turn it into a book, I'll donate all the proceeds. So that's the story of Camelback Mountain. So essentially, it's a little bit of a bedtime story, but I would urge you to please stay awake as I read you. So this is just from my heart, for all readers who treasure Camelback Mountain and the beauty of the Sonoran Desert. And the fun thing was I wrote it with my granddaughter, who was at that time 14, because I called her up and said, do you remember the story I told you when you were little? And do you want to write a book with me? And she said yes and yes. And she truly was the co-author. So it begins. I'm just going to read a few pages. Many moons ago in a desert, there was a princess. When she turned 5, her great-grandfather gifted her with a baby camel. She called her pet Sonoran. When you are 7 years old, you must take Sonora on a long and difficult journey across the desert, her great-grandfather said. This camel will be very special to the world, and you are chosen to be her helper. The princess took good care of her camel. She washed Sonora with water from a clear stream and fed her grasses, wheat, prickly pear, and thorny bushes. At night, she sang a lullaby. Sleep, my sweet Sonora, the moon watches over you. In the morning, Father Sun will come to guide your way. So the story is the story of what happens to the camel and the princess. And my favorite thing is, as a longtime environmentalist and 25 years on the board of the Grand Canyon Trust, saving things in landscape is really important to me. And I thought all these years I've written environmental stories to talk to adults. But it's really important, I think, to talk to children. And so at the end of the story, the camel has turned to stone, and the princess is there guiding the camel. So who's going to save the future for Camelback Mountain as more houses climb up its back? And as I told my children, my grandchildren when they were young, never worry, because when there's too many houses on the camel's back, the camel will awake. And the camel will shake and shake and shake and shake all the houses down. So the end of the story is the wind carried Sonora's message to the people who care. They listened and agreed. They promised to honor this beautiful landmark and save the mountain for everyone. The princess was over the moon with joy. Today, some see a praying monk when they look at the head of Camelback Mountain. But those who know this story know that the princess is protecting Sonora forever. So the best thing is, thanks, the best thing is the little children, the children that know this story, and we've sold over 3,500 copies, I've heard this over and over. They say to their parents, we have to be people who care. So it just speaks, I think, to the first message about protecting the press, protecting those things that we truly care about that are dear for all of us. So thank you.
It was wonderful. You know, I was about to get up here, Pam, and I was going to say, took a little liberty with that 4 minutes. But, you know, then you ended so strong, phenomenal, blew me away. So excellent work. But it does remind me at work and at home, I'm not the boss of anybody. So you take the time you need. So I'm going to ask John to come up next and tell us a little bit.
Can folks hear me on this? Thanks for being here. So I'm the author of the book, most recently, The Case for Open Borders. I'm just going to read a brief excerpt and say a few words of explanation. I like borders. Borders are places of connection, clash, and blend. They define cultures, languages, arts, cuisines, habits by exhibiting, testing, mingling, and breaking their distinctiveness and insularity. Borders are where humans trade in goods, ideas, and beliefs. They are places of ingenuity, mescla, neologism, and entrepot. Borders mark difference and possibility. As sites of beauty and definition, alloy and creation, they spark vibrant and unexpected harmony. Something only is what it is, as the philosopher G.W.F. Hegel put it, in its limit and through its limit. Infamously, however, regimes of crushing violence and dispiriting exploitation sully the creative and polyphonic potential of borders. As we deny, cast out, and crack down, we have turned our thresholds into barricades. Given the proliferation of such walling off of human beings, of human decency, and of human potential, how do we respond? So something, Michelle mentioned at the beginning about this diet of sort of centrism. I understand that with this title, especially given our political climate right now, this seems the case for open borders. This seems radical, incendiary, and one of the principal cases that I'm making with the book is that it is not, actually. It is that there is a long history of human movement. There is an inevitability of human movement, and there is more human movement than ever before in history right now. And, we have, over the years, over the past century or so, taken pretty great strides in trying to eliminate discrimination based on a whole host of inherent characteristics of people, their race or their religion or their sexuality. But one thing that has been pretty much left off the table throughout that period is birthplace. But for where you are born, you can be subject to extraordinary levels of violence and discrimination, and that is something that you can't change. And yet people are forced to flee. There are 110 million or so people who are forcibly displaced right now throughout the world, and that is going up rapidly. So one of the many things that I do in this book, I tackle it from an economic standpoint, a moral ethical standpoint, a historical standpoint, a climatological standpoint, is I explain this inevitability of human migration. And whether or not I'm going to win you over or the argument will actually land and change policy at all, I think this is one of the central questions I'm trying to ask. I think instead of trying to figure out how we stop migration, because as I keep on saying, we kind of can't, I think how we respond to the humans who migrate is just changing the framing a little bit and trying to respond to these people who are forced to flee or who decide to move with respect and dignity. And I think at least that is possible, and that is one of the central arguments I make in the book. I want to also just point very briefly to, given that this is a PEN event, given, again, as Michelle noted, the erosion of press freedom or the increasing attacks on the press, this is something that is happening throughout the country. This is something I felt the brunt of even very recently. I was impugned by our sheriff down in Pima County, and we see this increasingly happening right now, and I think that respecting the press and understanding its importance and its role in society is ever more important. And I'm going to give a shout out right now to a really alarming circumstance. So I worked, when I was reporting my first book, I did a lot of reporting out of El Salvador. And currently, a friend of the Trump administration, Nayib Bukele, who's the president of El Salvador, has been going after, in a very alarming way, a number of my former colleagues and friends. And 7 of them, in just the past week, have had to flee the country. And this is a place where the current administration is sending people and trying to send more people, paying that administration to receive them and to imprison them in a really atrocious setting. So just want to, and these people work at a independent media outlet called El Faro. That is something that is on the radar of many people, though El Salvador has been sort of brought into the national conversation a little bit. So I just want to point that out. If you can, read a little bit more about it, support them, support people who try to bring you the news in a fair and unfiltered way. So thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Not yet. Questions are soon. One second. But you're first when it's time. So, next up, wrestling with the incredible and sudden popularity of his first name, Leo Banks. Come on up, Leo.
Hi, everybody. Is this working? Piggybacking on John's talk, the book I wrote, the novel, is a crime novel set on the Arizona-Mexico border. It opens, I should say, with a woman named Mary O'Hara. She's Ireland-born, just graduated from Harvard. She's driving west to go to grad school at Stanford. She takes a detour, takes a border road, high centers her car, going nowhere, just as drug smugglers are nearby. Along comes Will Zachary, who runs the nearby ranch. He's on horseback. He rescues her. Lightning strikes, and they fall in love while they try to battle this drug cartel trying to take over the ranch. The part I'm going to read is they're riding away on horseback. Will Zachary's horse is named Lobo. Here we go. The rider kept Lobo running hard until they were clear of the smugglers. Slowing to a trot, he leaned over and spat out a mouthful of getaway dust. Lovely, she said in his ear. After a long pause and finding the silence hard to withstand, I'm assuming you have a name? He reached his hand over his shoulder. I'm William Juan Zachary. Nobody calls me anything but Will. She gave him a 3-fingered salute. Handshake, the most she was comfortable sharing. His rough skin felt like rotting wood. I'm Mary. Mary, you mean like happy? Most of the time. I'm afraid today is an exception. Do you have a last name, or is that a government secret? O'Hara, and you don't have to be so smart. Can't help it, Mary O'Hara. How'd you wind up out here? And she's tells a story about going to graduate school and graduating. After listening to talk meant to sanitize her blunder, Will said, Harvard, eh? Guess they don't teach you how to make up good stories. I beg your pardon? You didn't break down. You drove off a road you shouldn't have been on in the first place, and your car's still back there, high-centered and going nowhere. You're not going to spare me any embarrassment, are you? That wouldn't be any fun. I hope I don't sound cross. We'll unravel this predicament before you know it. I'm usually more agreeable when I careen into a ditch. Lucy Garcia should be along soon, Will said. She cowboys for me and runs the tow truck and junkyard in town. What I can't figure, you didn't find this road on anybody's map. I've never been to a border town and was trying to get to Nogales. Well, eventually. This was a detour. Mary had a husky voice and some kind of accent too faint to identify Irish. I wanted to see the country. I've never been to the far west. I'll pretend I'm surprised. It looked interesting. You know, the road not taken, Robert Frost. This country's made for poets, all right, but the stupid ones don't live long. Mary passed over the insult. She fished through the shoulder bag to retrieve her cell phone. She held it over her head, turned it and to hold it behind her, and to all the compass points. No signal anywhere. The worst day in human history continues. In desperation, Mary shook the phone as if that would help and looked at the screen again. Really? No bars? Go ahead and remove a limb, why don't you? You might get lucky on the rise behind my barn. It's a hike to get up there. I'll just use your landline, if you don't mind. Don't have one, Will said. Does your cell phone work around here? Had one of them once, but folks kept calling. Check between the cushions in my truck. Good Lord, where the hell am I? Paradise, Mary harumphed. Looks like nowhere to me. They ride along a little bit. Will felt Mary sliding away behind him. Get closer, you'll land on your rump. You can forget what I might land on. Okay, have it your way, ma'am. Why do you keep calling me ma'am? I told you my name. Manners, a bad habit of mine. Been working on it. There's nothing to hold on to anyway. I'm plenty close now, Will, if I can call you Will. He couldn't resist the mischief and said, I prefer Mr. Zachary. That made Mary mad. Well, Will, I'd be fine sitting close, but you're covered in dust like I've never seen. Where do you live anyway? Right here. He pulled back on the reins and pointed down into Cabezas Canyon where his house was located. They get there and stuff happens.
Stuff happens. I like that. And kids leave the room. So, finally, you delightful young adult, Christina Estes, please come on up.
Thank you so much, Tim. Can everyone hear me okay? Have to hold this mic way too close. It feels very awkward. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and I truly mean it. Everyone's time is valuable, and I know there are other things you could be doing, and I'm really in awe of the audience. Big numbers, so thank you so much. Tim, I'm going to read from both of my books, but don't worry, I've timed it. It's under the limit. So this is my debut novel, Off the Air. The sequel is The Story That Wouldn't Die, and this will hit the shelves August 19th. They both feature a Phoenix TV reporter. So a little close to my heart. I spent many years in TV before I moved to public radio. So I'm going to read the end of the first book. Spoiler, she survives, but it's a pretty tight call. And I'm going to start at Chicago Hamburger Company, and there's a reason that I'm starting there, and I won't take the time now, but if you're interested, hit me up afterward, and I will explain. So my main character, Jolene Garcia, is having lunch with her favorite photographer, Nate. After placing orders, we slide into a booth with a view of Chicago campaign signs going back 50 years, along with actual street signs from Clark and Addison, the famous intersection at Wrigley Field. Bob, the owner, has never been clear about how the signs made it 1,700 miles from the Windy City to the Valley of the Sun. Nate, her favorite photographer, raises a cup, a toast to one of my favorite reporters. One of, I'm not your favorite? Most days, he taps my cup. Congratulations on getting a groundbreaking exclusive and living to report it. I'll happily drink a Pepsi to that. Bob presents a loaded tray. Cheddar burger and garlic fries for me, Vienna dog and cheese fries for Nate, plus onion rings and 2 vanilla milkshakes. We didn't order all this, I say. Consider it a small thank you for exposing the truth, Bob says. We're not allowed. Thank you very much, Nate interrupts me. We appreciate your thoughtfulness. When Bob's out of earshot, I say, I don't think we should accept free food. Jolene, it's onion rings and shakes, not a $100 bill. Don't you think it's unethical? How? Is this secret payment to get us to do a positive story about the place? He waves a spoonful of ice cream. You may choose to deny the owner of this fine establishment the pleasure of satisfied customers, but I will not. His taste summons a look of bliss. But hey, no pressure. Shake's not that good anyway. You know, I say, the station's code of conduct says we can't accept anything valued at more than $25. These extras don't cost that much. With a sparkle in his eye, Nate slides the onion rings next to my burger. A familiar sound causes my fingers to drop the golden batter. This is a text message. 900 at City Hall, need you to go. 900? The text response, Chuck Welfare. Nate squints at the text. That's weak. Like you say, there's always time to eat. As my teeth sink into cheese, my eyes slide back to the phone. Text message says, Mayor stuck in elevator. Good grief. Text message, no one else available. This better be worth it. Now I'm going to read the beginning of the sequel. It's a slow news day. Scratch that. It's a slow news day, according to David Matthew. There are plenty of stories to tell in a metro area of 5 million people. But when your executive producer has an inferiority complex about working in Phoenix instead of Los Angeles, it's an argument you often lose. We call David sexy behind his back. Not because he's sexy, because he's always asking if a story is sexy. Hey, it might be silly, but at least it's a first. Nate glances at me from the driver's seat of our news truck. I grunt. Aren't you a ray of sunshine? You're just hangry, he says, and tired of chasing stupid stuff. Nate's worked with me long enough to let it go. He flips the radio to KEZ. Anyone know that station? Christmas is 6 weeks away, and Mariah Carey, Nat King Cole, and Jose Feliciano dominate the airwaves. I've never felt as rich as my first holiday season in Phoenix. Lounging coatless in a wicker chair on a slab of concrete patio, I was Oprah on the terrace of my Maui estate. After 2 years without snowstorms, freezing rain, and below zero wind chills, I still pinch myself. As Nate hums along to It's the Most Wonderful Time of Year, I check my phone hoping for a new text. But the same words that interrupted our lunch taunt me. Mayor stuck in elevator. Get to City Hall. And that's a true story. The mayor of Phoenix did get stuck in the elevator at City Hall. The rest is fiction, wink, wink, because there are some shady characters at City Hall. Thank you.
And many others got stuck in City Hall for far too long, but that's a different story. So we're going to have some questions. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to make sure there's time for yours, so start thinking about them. So let me jump into one. This answer has surprised me in the past. As authors, did you always want to be a book author, or is that something that came to you, a goal that came to you much later in your journalism career? And again, if you have nothing important to say, you don't have to answer every question. So who wants to begin? Anybody always wanted to be an author?
Do I have to say something?
Sure, Leo, you do have to say something.
Yes, I did always want to write novels. I spent quite a few years writing for Arizona Highways. I wrote 300 stories for them, more than 300. And that meant traveling around Arizona a lot, and I always carried a novel with me because I was staying in hotel rooms and I wanted to read it. So Raymond Chandler was with me on those trips. But yeah, I always wanted to write them.
John?
Yeah, I would add, same. I mean, I think it was inevitable, and it's inevitable that I will continue writing books. One thing that I really value in nonfiction books is just the room you have to add that context. So, you try to explain the intricacies of any sort of news story, and there's so much background that you have to cut out, both historical and contemporary, and having that extra room to really go deep, really try to get to the origin of the story, and explain all the characters and their backstory and how it all came together. You just don't have room for it in a news article, so extending your wings a little bit and in book form, it's been really, really helpful.
Excellent. Thank you. Pam, what do you think?
Yeah, so I was a magazine article writer major, which they don't even have that major at Northwestern. But so I wrote for magazines, and I ended up writing a lot for Ladies Home Journal magazine. And my editor there one day said to me, you should be writing books. And I said I should. So it really hadn't occurred to me. And so it was soon after that actually that I did start writing books. But as I said, they've been nonfiction. So, but I find that the thing that I love the most about that is the research, which takes you back to my reporter days.
Thank you for the question. Yes is the short answer. As a child, I always wanted to be an author. If some annoying adult would ask you when you're young, what do you want to be when you grow up? I actually said I wanted to be an author. I never knew any and never knew there was even a path to that. Well, there's really not, is there? So I think I chose journalism because I always liked to read and write. And I saw people's names in the newspaper, in magazines, and saw them on TV and heard them on the radio. And I think that's what led to journalism for me.
Fantastic. Well, let me ask this. You're all journalists, and you have certain skills or traits you've developed over a long time or a short time. Which of those skills help you in writing a book-length project, and which actually got in the way? Which did you have to sideline to move forward?
You're looking at me, so I'm going to answer. What helped was having perseverance and a very thick skin, though not thick enough for the publishing industry. It's really, yeah, it is something. It makes journalism look sometimes not as difficult. I guess I'll just put it that way. Thick skin, perseverance, and what did not help, I think, was because broadcast writing can be so tight and so sparse that my writing initially was a little too sparse. You had to add some details and some flavor. I mean, there's a big difference between writing a 30-second story that you might hear on the radio or see on TV versus 300 pages to a book.
Yeah, well, I have to confess, I've got a novel that I've been working on, but my agent has it, but so far hasn't been able to sell it. So I wasn't going to talk about it. However,
we've all been there.
However, what I'll tell you what really got in the way was at one point I needed to get my character in Morocco a few places, from one place to another. And of course I do the research, and the French didn't get the train to run till 2 years later than I needed. And I got stuck for 6 weeks on this. And my husband said to me, well, how's the book coming? I said, oh, it's terrible. It's not coming well. I cannot figure out how to get them where they're supposed to go because the train it's not going to start running and the French haven't taken over. My husband said, I can guarantee you that no reader will ever know that the train didn't run. He said, you're not being a journalist. You're trying to write a novel. So that does get in the way.
That and the French.
And the French.
I would say also I think there's something that was pretty useful of continually asking questions. There's sort of like the approach to journalism is somewhat Socratic. It's like you never have an answer actually, and so you can kind of keep on asking and never being satisfied with an explanation and trying to find like, well, then if that, then actually you try to go back a little bit further and just keep on pushing. And like I sort of was saying in my last answer, with an article, you have to eventually cap it at 800 words or maybe a couple thousand if you're lucky. But with a book, you can kind of really keep on probing. And that, I think, was something that was like really helpful to have that constant curiosity.
I love that, constant curiosity. So over a career, I'm sure all of you have covered many, many things. How did the topic of your book or books speak to you so deeply that you said, yeah, I want this to be a book-length project. I want to spend 6 months, a year, 2 years on this? Leo, were you always drawn to the West for the story? Did you know there were going to be Western stories?
Certainly to the West. Most of my books are actually Westerns, modern, contemporary Westerns. But this particular story, I spent a lot of. I know I have friends who have ranches on the border, and I heard their stories, so I wanted to write one up.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. Clearly, broadcast reporters are much pushier, aren't we?
Thank goodness.
So in the one that's coming out August 19th, A Story That Wouldn't Die, there's a thread about development and displacement, and that came straight from my reporting at City Hall. There were many months in covering City Hall where residents were showing up because they were being displaced. So some of you may have read, heard, or seen stories about it, specifically about some mobile home parks in Central Phoenix. So, property owners had these mobile home parks that have been around for decades, and developers come knocking and say, we'll give you a lot of money for this land. And the property owners sell, and they're not interested in keeping the people who have been there for decades. They want to make some money. So they're kicking people out so that they can build something new and much more expensive. And it was really, really heartbreaking to hear the stories, to talk to people who were really sad about losing their home. And I'm not going to talk too much about it because I'll start crying. But anyway, that's a thread through here, and I'll leave it at that.
Excellent. So let me ask about your writing process, if you could describe that. Are you a planner and a plotter, or do you wish you were and you get into it and you're like, oh my God, I got to get more organized on the next book? Or are you naturally organized?
I think John's organized. Are you?
Not really, honestly.
Well, you look like you would be.
Oh.
I feel like I trust the method, to steal a phrase, and just really push forward. And I feel like there's something in the language itself that if you really are attuned to, if you're really like paying attention to a story and you're attuned to the language in it, it sort of almost kind of crafts itself.
Okay, now I don't like you.
Can't be friends.
Fair.
Pam.
So I had this wonderful teacher, my favorite professor at Northwestern, Ben Baldwin, and he taught basic writing, and he was the first person I think really told me I could write, that I truly believed. And his mantra was, you should never wait for inspiration, because when you think you're inspired and you sit down and you write, read it the next morning, it's probably crap. He said, what you have to do is just do it all the time. You just do it. And I find that that's the best thing. I'm never someone who can move forward writing. If I hate it, I really hate it, and I have to solve it before I can move on. There's plenty of people that'll write a first draft all the way through and then go back and tear it apart. That's just not how I can work.
Do you remember the name, remember the name Shelby Foote from the Civil War series on PBS by Ken Burns? He said about inspiration, he said, I'm convinced that some of the worst writing the world has ever seen has been done under the influence of inspiration.
As an editor, I'm going to use that. You better believe it. So people are going to wonder, so I'm going to ask you, how did you actually get your books published? What was that process like? Did you do it on your own? Do you all have agents? That kind of thing. And, since we're all friends here and it's streaming around the country, but they're all friends too, how's the pay? Clamming up. Crickets.
I'm happy to, I don't want to hog the mic, but I'm happy to jump in. I want to respect people's time and keep things moving here. So I was rejected more than 100 times. I think it was more than 112, but I stopped counting at 112 because I figured it probably wasn't great for my mental health, which it wasn't. I received my publishing contract because I won a contest, the Tony Hillerman Prize for Best First Mystery Set in the Southwest. So as the prize winner, it was, hey, we'll publish your book. And so my contract was $10,000 and we'll publish your book. I'm trying to see the reaction. I wanted to see if people thought that was a little or a lot or what, because I get very different reactions when I tell people. And so just very quickly for those who, see, that's what I was just going to, so yes, with royalties. But so $10,000 is what is called an advance, and I apologize for those of you who know it, but I sat in the audience 800 times and no clue what people were talking about. So $10,000 was the advance that my publisher gave me, which means I got to keep it regardless of whether one book sold or a million. Not a million, but we're still out there. I could then earn more than $10,000 once I had earned that $10,000. So that $10,000 is an advance on how much I'm going to make. And so depending on the number of books that are sold, I can make 10 to 15% on the price of the book only after I have made the $10,000. Hopefully that's not too confusing, but I just wanted to share that because I sat in the audience a million times and I'm like, mine's not super, super private, so. I'm not going to tell you what my bank account is because I just went to Costco and I was really hungry, so it's not good.
So in the nonfiction world, you didn't need, With the nonfiction world, you need a platform. You don't need to have an agent, which is different today. For fiction, you need an agent. So in the nonfiction world, they gave you an advance, and I've done time management books and different books, and anywhere between 5 and 10 for an advance in those days. But what I unfortunately found was that unless you're really good at promoting your book, you don't usually get a whole lot more than that. I mean, that's pretty much what you see. The publishers are very smart. They have an idea of how many copies it's going to sell. And so people who are really strong, really great at promoting are the ones who really do better. But unfortunately, the publishers today spend all their promotion dollars on the known authors. I mean, look above you, Scott Turow, those are the guys that get the bucks. And so you as an unknown author have to do your own promoting, which is pretty expensive.
Nobody else is jumping up to share their 1040. So I'll just say, let's ask about marketing and promoting, because as an outsider, the world publishing seems to be different, and a lot of it's on you. So how have you developed the skill of marketing your own book, and did you find it came naturally, or is it just a pain in the neck? John, any thoughts?
Well, like the two books we had a publicist, and we did a very short tour. The first one, though, my first book landed in the spring of 2020. If anyone recalls, not a great time to be out hawking the book. So canceled the tour.
Was it about a
very small
pandemic?
tour. Unfortunately not. And all the op-eds I had planned were like, if there's not about COVID, we're not interested. But yeah, there is a lot of like sort of self-marketing that goes into it. I developed like a newsletter, and have social media accounts and whatnot. It's not my favorite thing to do, but when I get to talk about the content is what really draws me to it. And so I try to not think of it as like, I don't know, being a showman or something, and just actually talking about the issues. And that comes a little more naturally to me.
Anyone else? How's the marketing world for you?
It's a pain in the ass.
I don't think he had the mic up. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. I'm terrible at it.
Yeah, that surprises me.
I give speeches. I write this and that. Yeah. Some people are
Like duck to water, right?
genetically attuned to it. I am not.
Mm-hmm.
I learned something last year from this event. Someone came up to me and said, "You should hold up your book every time you talk about it." And so that stuck in my head. So if you see me doing that, thank you. Thank you.
Alan Corwin gave that advice. He also had one of the most popular questions, which I used again this year. So thank you, Alan, for the question about the bucks. It gets a mixed response, but that's an Alan Corwin question. I appreciate that. Has book writing opened up any nice opportunities for you that you wouldn't have thought otherwise, like maybe speaking or teaching? Yeah.
For being here, thank you.
Or being here at Poison Pen, yes. Any?
Well, so I think writing books that part's been hugely successful and really wonderful. My favorite thing is meeting the people you're writing about, getting to know them, getting to appreciate the topic you're working on. I mean, I think the fact that, that's never grown old for me. I get a topic that's interesting. I'm like an old horse and fire horse. I'm out of the thing looking for the fire. So I think that's great. The public speaking part is for me, it's fun. But I'm like it's very hard for me to sit and say to somebody, please buy my book. I'm terrible at that part of it, but I'm good at the other parts of it. So I think it's great. And I think in Phoenix, it made a huge difference because I got to know so many amazing people and had some extraordinary mentors that wouldn't have happened without it, without being able to write as a journalist and also books.
I'll add something sort of on the front side of it instead of the back side. It does open some opportunities like this. This is wonderful. But one of the things that I found, going again back to my first book, when I was reporting it, it was in the spring of 2018. I was doing the research mostly in Central America, and that was at the height of the family separation crisis, when a lot of people from Central America who had traveled to the United States had their kids taken from them. And there was just an incredible parachuting of international journalists who are down in Central America to try to tell those stories. And a lot of people were staying for a week or two at the most. And since I was focused on the book, that was double dipping and writing some magazine stories. I was like, I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay here. And I stayed a lot longer. And I think that push to try to dig in a little bit further and try to really hear out people's stories and see like the ongoing consequences, not just the immediate thing. You follow your story and you go home. That was a really rewarding experience. And I'll say for all of us, including for those who don't like to say that you should buy their books, you should buy our books. And you should buy books in general. I mean, it helps, us as authors, whatever, that's is self-gratifying, but it really helps the industry. It helps democracy. It helps all of that. So, buy a book on your way out the door, any book. It doesn't have to be mine or ours, but that would be great too. Yeah.
So, absolutely. And I was going to say, for anyone who has read Christina's first book, I'm awaiting the second, knows that a theme of that book that Jolene struggles with, the character, is the parachuting in for what becomes a national story in a local area, and the struggle of the local reporters to have people call them back, even though they've been covering it. So it's fascinating that you cover
Thank
this.
you. It's my personal pet peeve, so I'm glad you noticed.
Absolutely, that's right. That and eating locally, you're big on. Yes. How have friends and family reacted to your maybe transition to this life? Do they ask you more questions about book writing than they ever did about journalism, or are they sorry you're not a daily journalist? I don't know.
Look at Leo go. Woo.
Here, my first novel was called Double Wide, and it was universally reviewed, fortunately, very well. The only bad review I had was from my mother. She was
Same.
She was 98 maybe at the time. She said, "I don't like the language you use in that book." I said, "Did you ever listen to Dad?" She says, "And I don't like the way you talk about women in the book." And I said, "Okay." And she just didn't understand a lot of what was going on in the book, I don't think. But her head was pretty clear at that point. She liked Opal, yeah. But yeah, that was the only bad review. Thanks a lot, Ma. She lived to be 100.
Related question. Do you suspect your family members say they say they read the book and you're like, I don't think they read the book? Well, are they supporters? Are they fans for any of you?
You want to answer?
My brothers, they're weirdos. Yeah, I got sisters-in-laws that like it. My two brothers really don't say much of anything. One lives far away and the other lives even farther away. So.
If there are
I
any
try not
authors
to-
in the audience looking for a topic for the next book, I think Leo's family might be a good one.
We try to
Maricopa,
avoid that
Osage County, yes.
because you try to sort of avoid family and friends, at least I do, asking their thoughts about it after they've read it because, one, you don't know if they're telling the truth, if they're just being kind, or two, if they say something, you're like, but how come you didn't say anything about this part? I thought you would like this part. So it's sort of, you're just grateful that they support you, and at least I am, and kind of try to leave it at that. So they'll continue to support me.
Excellent. I'm going to jump to a couple questions that we've received from people online, then I'm going to turn to you in the room. We're getting a lot of questions about journalism, so I'm not going to focus so much on those because that's not exactly what today's event is about. But I will ask one question, which is, what do you love and hate about, they said, being a journalist and being an author. Let's focus on being an author. What do you love? What do you hate about being an author? Do you have any hate? Maybe no hate at all. Or dislike the most?
I'm going to talk about what I love, which is being here, which is like having a childhood dream come true. Here I go, holding it up, August 19th. I mean, it took me 15 years from the time I said I'm going to write a book until my first book was published. So this is truly a dream come true. And any kind word, any review that's posted, I really, really appreciate it.
Okay, so the thing that's hard for me, because I generally am a social kind of person, is it's you have to write by yourself. I mean, I can't write with other people, although I do now have a really good writers group that we meet once a month, and they really are good, and that's helped me. But it's a solitary existence. It really is. And when my husband was alive, it was great because he was very interested, and he was always very interested in what I was doing. But now it's just me, and so it's very fortunate that I have a very literate standard poodle who loves writing.
Best writing partners are dogs.
So, Pam, you mentioned reviews. How important have reviews become for what you do? And, it's not like you're going to count on the Sunday newspaper to do book reviews anymore. How important do you bird dog, and do you encourage people to use Goodreads and Amazon and all these things? Or do you just lay back and hope it all works out?
Do you want to answer, John? You're moving.
Yeah, I tried to get some reviews, and I also really tried to get the book in the hands of some authors I really respect. That was important to me. Their books meant a lot and have crafted the way I approach the world and approach journalism. And so I kind of wanted to be in conversation with them. And one of the ways as an author that you do that is by handing them your book. And a couple of times that ended up in a review or essay, and that was really gratifying.
I'm super grateful that my publisher is able to submit at least early copies of my book, as well as the other authors that they represent, to Publishers Weekly, which is a trade magazine. And I'm trying to remember the quote because I just got it this week. Brain-teasing, fair play puzzle. So it was a good thing. And you're like, phew. But I was really shocked at how important early reviews are. So if any of you are on Goodreads, or if you have NetGalley accounts, please consider requesting the story that wouldn't die and posting a review, because reviews, I didn't know, are really how librarians and booksellers often decide whether they're going to order your book, and if so, how many, because they want to see whether the early version has generated any interest from people. So early reviews anytime are important, but early reviews are really super important.
Yeah, I'll add to that a little bit. One thing I wasn't aware of at all until I published the first book is that there are books in each season that a publisher decides to really promote. And there are books that they just publish and kind of just let either the author do what they will with it, or maybe kind of languish. And you need to, if your book isn't one of the ones selected, you need to push hard for it. And those early reviews sometimes really kind of convince the publisher to be like, or the blurbs or the early reviews convince the publisher to put a little bit more muscle behind it.
Excellent. I'm going to ask one question from online. This is from Stefania in Italy, and I ask all the questions we get from Italy.
Yeah,
so
she's always tunes in from Italy.
And this is a journalism question, but I feel compelled to ask it, which is, what is the biggest threat to the work of a journalist today, or the biggest difficulty a journalist has to face? So we'll keep this part brief because this is about books today, but I do want to hear the answer to that. What do you think?
I'm going to say money, because money, not how little journalists make, but how much companies are looking at the bottom line. That has just impacted since 60 Minutes launched 50 years ago, is when, at least in the broadcast world, is when networks started looking at news as being a profit machine instead of a public service.
Say disinterest, distraction. What's the difference maybe in the end between those two? The people expecting that the news should come to them for free, or not noting the difference between what is news, what is has been edited and fact-checked and published, compared to what is an opinion, just kicking around on the internet.
Yeah, and I would say the newspapers themselves have, and I think it's only going to get worse with this administration, frankly. They're not bold, and I think, when I wrote for The Plain Dealer, I remember doing a front page series on redlining, and my editor said, we can't run this because real estate people are our advertisers. You got to make sure you're right. And I was young and brash, and plus I was right. So I said, go check everything. I'm right. And it ran front page 4 days in a row, won them awards. And I don't know who would do that today. I mean, I think today it's so corporate. At that time, This was owned by Tom Vail. The Vail family owned the Plain Dealer. It was local ownership, and it went up to the top. It went to Vail, and I remember I got a call back, and Tom Vail said, she better be right. And it was probably one of the high points in my that period of my career. But I don't know that there are those people today that own papers locally, and which is why I think that small local papers need to be supported, because I think that's where people are. That's where you're going to find the more fearless writers and editors.
Plug for Arizona Luminaria.
Yeah, Arizona Illuminatia, they, I don't know if you know that, won an SPJ Phoenix Award last year for its coverage, so shout out. So we're going to come back to you in about 10 minutes with a closing question, closing thought. Think about what we didn't get to cover that you want to say to leave us with a closing thought. Because I want to turn to the audience now for maybe 10 minutes of questions. And you know I'm starting with Nicole's mom. So.
You should.
Oh, yeah.
Start with my mother. No, I can speak very loud. I
Well,
have a real big mouth.
You're online as well, so we kind of need
the mic, okay. All right. Sir, the gentleman wearing the brown shirt, John, could you hold up your book?
Thank you for asking him to do that.
The Case for Open Borders by John Washington. That kind of caught my eye because I am a product of the border, because I was born in the Bisbee-Douglas rural area, and I was raised in Bisbee. I was brought to Bisbee when I was 3 days old from the hospital, from the county hospital in Cochise County. So that kind of, piqued my interest. So the question that I want to ask you is more political, and I know that that's kind of a bad word right now. But how do you feel about that part of the country, like Fort Huachuca and Cochise County, being filled with military people and military vehicles, and I think they're thicker than fleas on a dog, and how that is going to work with your title? Could you hold your book up again, please?
Thanks for the encouragement.
Case for Open Borders and the militarization of that area. So I don't know if I have a specific question. Maybe it's just a concern. But how would you like to handle that and say, what is the effect of these people being there, the equipment, tearing up the desert, and the people? Are they terrorized? Are they threatening the people that from both sides of the border? Maybe I'm just too interested in that whole theme, period. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say my name because I'll probably be picked up and be sent to
I hope
Liberia
not.
or somewhere.
Yeah. It sounds like a joke, but it's not that far beyond the pale of where we're at right now. The hyper-militarization of the border, whether it be actually military personnel, materiel, or surveillance technology, affects people who are crossing the border, who decide to cross the border, forced to cross the border, compelled to cross the border. It also affects people who are on this side of the border. People who have to cross through checkpoints to go to the grocery store. That is the condition of people living in different parts of rural Arizona right now. I think one thing that we're seeing right now in New Mexico is that the Department of Defense just took over land. The entire border, it's about a 60-foot strip of right north of the international line. And that is now off limits for everybody, including U.S. citizens. And people can be prosecuted for trespassing onto DoD property, and things could escalate from there if they do so. And a lot of people who are watching this closely think that potentially something similar is coming to Arizona. It's a little bit complicated because there's so many different land jurisdictions in Arizona. In New Mexico, it's basically all just sort of one strip. But we'll see what happens. I think it's really alarming.
What if I were a billionaire? I want to open up create a new town for my space launch ship. Could I? Anyway, that's another question. It's got to be out here. I know people are wondering. Yes. Let me go to the back here. Let me hand this to you.
I saw you. I'll make sure he gets to you.
How would you say your research process differs when writing a novel versus writing like a story for the broadcast or for journalism?
hate research. I do as little as possible. Google and AI are wonderful for research. I was a reporter for so long that I met a lot of characters and people in different contexts, and that stuff sort of pops into my brain. I'll tell you one quick story. I did a book called Champagne Cowboys, and it had a sniper angle. And I interviewed a Navy SEAL who was retired, and we met in Tucson. And he was talking about snipers he knew and how they worked and all of that. And I took a ton of notes. And I think the key to research is to do it and then not use it. I mean, it sounds counterintuitive, but if you do enough research, it gives you confidence to write confidently, which you need to do. But for all of the things he said, the only thing I used was, he said, being a sniper is a math problem. It's fundamentally a math problem. And I asked what he meant, and he said, figuring out distance, figuring out wind, figuring out humidity, figuring out all of that stuff I can't do. But that's what research does for you, I think. You find one thing you would never come up with on your own. On the border book, I was on horseback with a friend who has a ranch along the border, and it was winter, and God, it was cold. And he said, we were talking about the cold, he said his father told him when he was a kid to always carry stick matches, because if you get thrown from your horse out here into one of these canyons, if you can't light a fire, you'll die. You'll freeze to death. That's cool. I could never have thought of that on my own.
You know, let me ask Pam. So research in nonfiction is pretty vital. And so, like, if you write a book about great places to go in Arizona, and it takes a year to write that book, as it's about to drop, do you have to go and recheck everything? Because if I get to a trail that you told me is there and it's not there.
Okay, I'll tell you my worst story ever. I've got a day trips from Phoenix, Tucson, and Flagstaff book that I've been writing for years, and it's a 14th edition. And I was first doing it and you know, very concerned about everything. Plus I have no sense of direction. And so my husband had to go with me because I didn't know left from right, up from down. And so I was really, really very careful with that. And at the very end, there was a ranch, a new guest ranch this lady was opening, and in the Dragoons, and it was absolutely beautiful. But the ranch was not in good shape. She assured me that she was doing all these wonderful things. So because there's very few really cool places in that area to include, I included it. So in all the years that I've been doing this book, which is what, almost 30, probably more than 30, it's the only awful letter I ever got from somebody. This woman wrote to me and said I ruined her vacation. I mean, can you imagine? She came from Boston. She bought my book. I ruined her vacation, this place, and she went chapter by verse. I'm telling you, I thought that's it for me. I mean, I wrote her back apologizing. What could I do? I wasn't going to pay for her whole vacation.
It might have been my mother.
It might have been. So I never did that again. I only report on things I've seen.
All right. So you had your hand up, and I'm giving this to you not just because you have a question. You have beautiful glasses. Your glasses are great.
Thank you. Gosh, it's an honor to be here. So I love listening to all of you and learning. It's been spectacular. I am a recently self-published author. And
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I came to just get some insight or some advice because it's not an easy road. I have a business too, but it's a different type of business. Now I'm in the book business. So I just wanted to ask if you can give a new self-published author any advice, what would it be?
Write another book.
Really? Okay.
Just keep pushing. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I've already bought 3,500 copies. I've already got it on Amazon, and I've got it in a few places and on the website, and it's really a nice book. But other than that, anything else?
Is it fiction or nonfiction?
It's nonfiction.
So you've got a website?
Yes.
So seriously, you've got to do social media marketing.
Yes, I'm doing that
it.
too.
That's the best thing you can do. The other thing I think that's really important is get good reviews.
Got it.
Get people so that you can have good blurbs on the cover.
Okay.
because that matters. And so, and you send it to anybody. I don't know what the topic
Well,
is.
I started my own publishing company too. So I self-published it with my publishing company.
Right.
And I own a tequila company. So the book is telling the story about the tequila and the love story behind the bottle. But I added in cocktail recipes to give some value.
Oh,
So
it sounds
each
really cool.
story has a cocktail recipe that you want to make and kind of learn the love story. So anyway, I'm not here to push the book, of course, but I just did.
I will just very quickly, I will point
I
out.
have it here, but I just wanted to know, what are your thoughts on somebody that's like just starting out and winging it?
So you are really amazing, because that is an absolute full-time job, and that's something that I could do. So congratulations. You sound like you really have it together. I will very quickly, because I know time is tight. I saw Tim glancing. The Poison Pen has local author fairs. So before you leave, I would suggest asking John or Jen at the desk about the next local author fair and how to get involved. And that is specifically to help support local independently published authors.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank the pen.
Yes.
And samples. I love that. And I hate to say it, I think we have time for one more question before I turn back to our panel. Anybody have a really good question
Two
they're
in the
itching
back.
to ask? Where?
Two in the back.
Okay. Now, as I approach, dig deep. Is this really a question? It's not a speech, right? It's a question. Excellent.
Thank you. Christine, you had said that you had been rejected by 112 publishers.
Agents. So
Agents.
the traditional route is get an agent, and the agent then tries to find an editor who's interested. The editor then pitches the publisher and the sales department and all those people. And then if you're lucky, they say, okay, you can write it. Or
So
we'll buy it.
what do you tell yourself? Because you kept going. So
Listen,
mean,
the
we
secret
wrote-
to being published is
Uh-huh.
to never quit. That's
Never
the
quit.
secret to being published. Being open to learning and getting better and sticking with it. That's the secret. That's the only way you get published.
And a quick question, follow up here. What about social media? Like now we have TikTok, we have Instagram, is that an issue maybe for somebody as an
Social
as
media
an
is an issue
author?
for everyone in some way, right?
You
But
know,
yes,
'cause
as an author, yes, you have to. I mean, you don't have to do anything. My publisher will say you don't have to do anything. You can do what you're comfortable with. Well, I'm comfortable with wanting to continue to write. Therefore, I must do social media. Therefore, I must hold up my book
Yes.
and remind you that it's available August 19th.
I always tell everybody, because I used to work at Channel 12 last, but I also worked at Univision and Telemundo here. But I've worked in many states. I've actually met Tim before. So I always tell everybody, you don't need television anymore. You don't need radio anymore. You are your best promoter. So I would encourage you guys to actually be more active on social media.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So now we're going to turn back to you, our panel, because I always like to have you have the last word. Well, I'll get the last word, but you'll get the second to last word. And so I'm sure there's a message that you didn't get to tell because we had a short time, or anything, any closing remarks for the group? Maybe a minute to two? Go.
Okay, hit the timer. I'm going to go for less than a minute, okay? Thank you again very much. I sincerely appreciate it. I have come to countless events here at the Pen, and I really do appreciate you showing up, especially those online. Stefania, Renee, Robin, I know you're the regulars. I will just quickly, again, hold up the book, The Story That Wouldn't Die. This is a very special book. You're probably not supposed to say this, but I feel like this one is better than my debut. And it's very special because I wrote this book long before I took a new job that I just started 5 or 6 weeks ago. This book centers all around City Hall in Phoenix, and there are some potentially shady characters and shady business happening, and I am now communications director for the Vice Mayor of Phoenix. So, if after
Stranger than fiction.
If after August 19th, when this book comes out, if you somehow see me, I don't know, working overnights at the landfill or I've disappeared, please look for me.
That's so good. Okay, I'm going to be very brief because I was long at the first. So we had a sign in my parents' bookshop. That was my favorite sign. So what I'm going to say to you, because the sign in our bookshop said, "Give a book the gift that's open more than once." So I've always thought what I would encourage you to do, because if I'm a writer, I need to have readers. So I would just thank you all for being here and encourage you to keep reading and encourage you to keep buying books, the gift that's open more than once, from independent bookstores.
No clue what to say, except if you're thinking of writing a novel, don't. Run like hell. But if you must, here's what it is. You get up in the morning and you stumble into your office and you put your butt in the chair and words on the screen. That's it. There's nothing else to it. Simple. Every day, 7 days a week. David McCullough, I just thought of something. You remember David McCullough, absolutely brilliant history writer. He tells a wonderful story. He's in his 30s. He's in New York. He's trying to get started as a writer. He doesn't know how. Everybody thinks there's a secret to being a writer. He goes to a party hosted by Alvin Josephie, who was the editor at the time of American Heritage Magazine. Josephie knows David's predicament, and he points across the room. He says, "See that guy over there? He's written more than 100 books. You should go talk to him." McCullough's like, 100 books? So he goes over and he introduces himself and says, the guy's name is Harry Sinclair Drago. He says, "Mr. Drago, I understand you've written 100 books. He says, "Yes, that's right." McCullough says, How do you do that?" He said, 4 pages a day, every day. And McCullough later said it was the best advice he ever got. Butt in chair, words on the screen.
I'd say parting message is read widely and read weirdly. Try to, there's the wonderful entertainment value and, reprieve that you can find in a book. But I think we also, use books and can use books and should to edify ourselves, to challenge ourselves, cross genres that you're not comfortable going into. And, children's books, novels, political books. And, it's important for individual level and important for society as well. So, yeah, leave it at that.
Absolutely great. That is wonderful. So I'll tell you, there was one other question we weren't able to get to that, and probably you had some that you wanted to ask. And the question, Michelle, maybe it's another program in the future, they wanted to ask you, Michelle Beaver, how do you become a ghost writer? So that's another whole discussion maybe if we want to get into it. But not right now. Right now, I just want to say that everybody here can safely report that journalists make great book authors. These journalists, anyway, know how to turn a phrase, spin a yarn, engage readers, engage us, make excited about buying books, and change lives and communities. So I appreciate that. Thank you to our authors. Go forth and write more, which is great advice for the audience as well. And the audience, take up the pen if you're of a mind, and feel free to support organizations like PEN and SBJ if you agree that the First Amendment is worth safeguarding. Let's put our hands together and show some Poison Pen love. Thank you, and please do linger and buttonhole the